Hello and welcome to the latest episode of MPP Insider, your source for all the latest news in the marijuana policy reform movement. I'm Mike Mino.
I'm Kurt Gardner.
And we're here to update you on some of the news that we here at MPP have been following the last few weeks. And starting us off with this installment, Kurt is going to talk about Kansas.
I am, the great state of Kansas. Earlier this month, a state representative, Gail Finney, introduced a medical marijuana bill, which we were all very pleased about. Kansas is smack dab in the middle of the country. It's
right in the middle, the heart of America.
That's right. It wasn't all that well received by every state representative in the Kansas legislature. One specific representative, Scott Schwab, was quoted in an article recently saying that all marijuana does is make you want to grab a bag of potato chips, which we feel is quite ignorant. And like you said earlier when we were talking about this, that it's actually hurtful to patients who actually need medical marijuana, that are suffering from various illnesses.
It's insensitive because, this might be a little comical when people talk about how marijuana gives you the munchies, but it is a real fact that marijuana has properties that stimulate the appetite, and that for many people, cancer patients on chemotherapy, people with digestive problems and nausea, those very properties can have medicinal value.
Definitely.
So, to hear a politician say something that insensitive is really bothering.
It is. It's troubling. And he's clearly not listening to his constituents. A recent poll in Kansas had 58% of Kansas citizens supporting medical marijuana. And nationally, as we said in our first episode, the most recent ABC News Washington Post poll has support across the country at 81% of Americans supporting medical marijuana. So clearly he needs to start listening to his constituents.
Yeah, and what better example, Kansas, majority support in Kansas, 81% nationwide. We say this all the time, we're not making it up. Medical marijuana is a bipartisan issue, it is a mainstream issue, it spans the political spectrum. Nobody of any political persuasion wants to see sick and dying patients treated like criminals simply for trying to get better.
That's true. And Kansas is trying to become the 15th state, but there's another state who might beat them to it.
We have several in the running for 2010. Last episode we talked about Maryland. Just a real quick update. That bill that we talked about earlier and that you can read about on our blog at blog.mpp.org.
Nice plug there.
How about that? That bill finally got introduced in the State House and Senate, and we're going to keep you up to date on any developments with that. Another quick update on the DEA front. This raid that happened. It wasn't a raid. It was an investigation. And
basically, I am going to tell us why.
Yeah.
The DEA earlier this month, I blogged about this at what's the website again?
blog.mpp.org.
That is right. Okay. Earlier this month I blogged about a medical marijuana lab being raided in Denver, Colorado. It turns out it technically wasn't a raid. Basically, this lab, Full Spectrum Laboratories, applied for a license with the DEA, and because they did that, the DEA policy and law requires them to visit the facility to approve their application. So technically it was not a raid, which we wanted to clarify today. But obviously we feel that the DEA is wasting their time, going after a medical marijuana lab that's literally testing the potency of marijuana that's going to be distributed to medical marijuana patients.
That has the interests of patients in mind.
Yes, definitely.
Other real quick updates, we had bills that would decriminalize small possessions of marijuana introduced in Vermont and Rhode Island. And in Rhode Island, there's actually a big endorsement from the state's largest newspaper. The Providence Journal came out in favor of decriminalizing marijuana. So, that's just a really encouraging example of the mainstream media, an influential paper in the state of Rhode Island, no doubt, saying, this is the right thing to do. It makes sense. It's a waste of government resources to not do this. So that was good.
It was great, yeah. Very good.
DC, we also had, yeah.
We do. We were supposed to hold a hearing yesterday in DC in terms of, to give you a little background, in 1998, DC citizens overwhelmingly passed a medical marijuana law initiative. Nearly 70% of the voters voted in favor of that. Because of some congressional intervening, basically they nullified the voters, and DC has not been able to implement the vote. But as of last year, when President Obama signed the omnibus spending bill, it basically nullified the amendment that prohibited DC to implement their medical marijuana law. But that is over, so we're now in the process of the DC City Council holding hearings and pretty much deciding how the law should be implemented. was supposed to be held yesterday, but because of the city's inability to clear snow off the streets.
We are covered in snow.
We are. So because of that, they postponed it until next week. And go back to visit our website, mpp.org, and we'll let you know where and when that hearing will be rescheduled.
But we were saying before, we think it's worth noting that in all this talk of legislative updates and political jargon and what bills are introduced and what politicians are saying what, sometimes it's easy to forget that at the heart of these laws are real people and, unfortunately, many real victims. Not only patients and chronically ill people who are being treated like criminals for trying to use marijuana as a legitimate medicine that it is, but also people who get caught up in the wrong side of marijuana prohibition. This prohibition is a terrible, ineffective policy that destroys lives. And every week at our blog.mpp.org, has I think it's the third plug in how many minutes?
Yeah.
You can read stories about these victims who just get caught up on the wrong side of this terrible, terrible law. Just this week, we had stories about a 74-year-old grandmother who was arrested and detained by Border Patrol agents for a 30-year-old possession charge.
Yeah.
I mean, think of how ridiculous that was. There was a man in Massachusetts, 45 years old, a husband, a father, a family man. Apparently, he was smoking or had a marijuana cigarette at a DUI checkpoint. Some sort of struggle with police ensued, and by the end of the night, he was dead. The state's medical examiner said that it's been ruled a homicide. His death was ruled as a result of injuries sustained while, and this is a direct quote, struggling with police. And his family has actually filed a federal lawsuit claiming that police essentially beat this guy to death. We don't know the details of it yet, but who knows what role marijuana played in the original stop. But again, it's just, prohibition doesn't lead to anywhere good. It doesn't make anything better.
No.
Basically,
we need marijuana prohibition to end. And just a stat that goes along with that story that Mike just mentioned is over 800,000 Americans are arrested every year in this country for simple marijuana possession. That's one American...
Every 37 seconds.
Yeah, every 37 seconds. So clearly our marijuana laws are not working.
Yeah, they do far more harm than good. And, as we talk about this, it's just important to keep those people in mind. How should we bring up this idiot on the plane?
Well, I'm just going to bring up the idiot on the plane. There was a somewhat humorous story in the news this month. There was a San Francisco man who was flying from Philadelphia to Los Angeles, and he basically lost it. He flipped out on the plane. I'll read you from this article. The San Francisco man ransacked an airplane bathroom while screaming. Then he emerged from the bathroom with his pants down. After refusing to take his seat, he fought with flight attendants. And, what does he blame it on, Mike? Well, Mike knows. He's blaming it on marijuana, medical
being
marijuana.
Under the influence of his medical marijuana. Now, he is a certified medical marijuana patient in California. The problem is when stories come out like this, the media love to pick it up. They love to run with it. You say, oh, look at this, this marijuana user on the plane, all the crazy stuff he does. And it sets us back a little in terms of public perception because stuff like this is typically not caused by marijuana, and we're pretty skeptical of this guy's excuse.
Definitely. Aaron Smith, who's our California policy director out there, was quoted in, I think, the San Francisco Weekly, and let me read you his quote. Aaron Smith says, most evidence shows marijuana makes you even more subdued. Violence is something alcohol is linked to when you hear about problems on a plane. So it's a great point Aaron makes. This is not something that is a result of using marijuana.
So the battle goes on in terms of, hearts and minds, but also legislatively. And we'll be here next time on MPP Insider to tell you what's happened since this episode. So,
we will.
Yeah.
So I'm going to close this out. Is that all right?
Go for it.
Okay. For MPP Insider, I'm Kurt Gardenier.
I'm Mike Mino.
Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.